Well, thank you, Professor Pearson, for that very generous introduction. And I find I need an introduction to explain to people exactly who I am after the Prime Minister's intervention over the summer period. But Professor Pearson, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming out today. Could I too begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and just remind everyone here today that the land we're meeting on was, is, and always will be Aboriginal land. Could I again just acknowledge you, Professor Pearson? Thank you for your leadership, not only at Charles Sturt, but also here at Affinity, and acknowledge your respected scholarship over so many years. I'd also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the outstanding work that Affinity does in creating dialogues and building communities. It is absolutely outstanding. I've been associated with Affinity for many years, so when the opportunity came to speak here, it was one I jumped at. So thank you for your continued leadership in building a better community here in Australia. I want to take this opportunity whilst we're at Affinity to also acknowledge the many Australian Muslims that contribute so much in our national parks network. As the Minister for the Environment, I know firsthand the work that they're doing, planting out trees, restoring waterways, and now working on regenerating our bushland that's been burnt in this black summer. They're the standard bearers of hope. They deliver real climate action on the ground, and I want to take this opportunity to publicly acknowledge their work here today. So I've decided today to speak on now is the right time to talk about climate change. Over the summer, our state faced bushfires unprecedented in their intensity and scope, like nothing we'd ever seen before. Smoke over Sydney was the worst in living memory. The fire ground exceeded more than 5.3 million hectares. We lost over 2.7 million hectares of our national park estate. It had a devastating effect, yes, on people and property, but also it took out a number of our most critically endangered environmental assets. It was completely unacceptable. At the time, as was right, the government's first priority was to support the firefighters and to protect lives and property. Now, with the fires thankfully extinguished and the recovery work well underway, it is the right time to look at the causes of the bushfires so that we can avoid them happening in the future. Now, the fires happened in the worst drought in the state's history, after two of the hottest years on record. These extreme weather events are exactly what the scientists warned us about for decades. Longer drier periods, more heat waves, resulting in worse bushfires. This is exactly what they said climate change would look like. So it's the right time to stop the futile arguments about whether climate change is or isn't happening. And it's time to win the climate wars. Because it's dead wrong to see incompatibility between economic and environmental outcomes. Because taking action on climate change will actually save households money now and create jobs into the future. And because protecting our natural environment will make it more resilient and ensure future generations can enjoy the unique flora and fauna that is their birthright. Now, the New South Wales government has been trying to lead the way in this space, against some difficult headwinds, I might add. We were one of the first jurisdictions anywhere in the Western world to sign up to a position of zero net emissions. We did it before Germany, we did it before France, we did it before Britain, and we have led Australia when it comes to committing to zero net emissions, not just because of the benefit it will have to our environment, but more importantly, or just as importantly, because of the benefit it will have to our economy. We're reducing our emissions here in New South Wales faster than the national average. It's a good start, but there's a long way to go. We're developing the nation's first coordinated renewable energy zone. 3,000 megawatts of new, clean, cheap electricity that will be injected into the system, and it's just the beginning. We aim to have 9,000 megawatts of renewable electricity built or started to be built by the end of this term of government. And to put that into perspective, that is almost replacing the entire capacity of the existing thermal generation that we rely on. Right now, we have coal-fired power plants that provide about 14,000 megawatts of electricity into the system when we need it. So 9,000 megawatts of renewable electricity coming into the system is will have a huge impact and go a long way to transitioning us to a new modern electricity grid. It's important that we stress the reality that taking action to reduce our emissions does not need to come at the expense of our economy. And that's something that has been absent from the debate for a long time. The economics have changed dramatically. Right now, it presents an enormous economic opportunity for our nation that would be too good to miss. You see, the thing is that renewables are now the cheapest way to deliver electricity into the system. Renewables, sun, wind, backed up by pumped hydro, with battery storage coming down the cost curve, is now the cheapest way to deliver energy into the system. It's not nuclear, it's not coal, it's not gas, it's renewables backed up by pumped hydro. And that's not me saying that. That's the scientists saying that. That's the economists saying that. Look at the recent report by the independent market operator AEMO. They've said the levelised cost of electricity clearly demonstrates that it's sun, wind, backed up by pumped hydro. So there's a lot of people talking about other forms of energy generation at the moment. They're chasing unicorns. They are chasing unicorns. Because right now, if you actually want to deliver on the objective, which I do, which is finding the lowest cost form of reliable generation, as I said, it's sun, wind, backed up by pumped hydro and other firming technologies. We're seeing families around the country installing solar panels on their rooftops, not just because it's good for the environment, because it's good for their household budgets. We've got the highest penetration of rooftop solar anywhere in the world, right here in Australia. More than 60 countries around the world have committed to zero net emissions by 2050. The global transition to net zero is going to require trillions of dollars of investment in low emissions technologies. And I want a big slice of that investment coming to our place right here in New South Wales. We know that international investors are increasingly turning their backs on carbon-intensive energy and the economies that they power. The markets have made up their minds. The community's made up their mind. Now government needs to get on board and facilitate this transition, and that's what I'm aiming to achieve. As a politician on the right of Australian politics, the right of Australian politics have not been showing the leadership that we should have for a long time. It's time for that to change. As someone on the right of Australian politics, the reason I'm there is because I believe in the power of markets. I'm a capitalist. And the reason I believe in the power of markets is because they unleash innovation, propel investment, create jobs and foster prosperity. And to function properly, they need information and capital. And the information and the capital are moving towards a low carbon future. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a huge opportunity for our country. To help ensure the flow of reliable information, the government is investing in research to study the impacts of climate change on New South Wales, so that councils and businesses can make informed decisions about how we mitigate and how we adapt. To ensure we harness the capital investment into our energy system, we're putting in place sensible strategic plans to ensure that investors find in our state the best people, the best infrastructure, and the cheapest, most reliable, lowest emissions energy in the world. And Professor Pearson mentioned the state's first ever electricity strategy. In fact, it's the nation's first electricity strategy, which is about providing certainty to the private sector so that they can invest with confidence and deliver that new generation that we need to keep the lights on and drive down electricity prices in New South Wales. It's one of the biggest barriers that's causing increases in electricity prices and one of the biggest barriers to investment. Government has not provided certainty to the private sector for them to invest with confidence so that they see a return on that investment. And that's what we're seeking to change here in New South Wales. We want to ensure that all New South Wales families have access to clean, reliable, affordable energy, and that their kids have a bright future filled with the jobs and opportunities that the modern economy will bring. So I'm enormously optimistic about the challenges we face. Climate change does present a huge threat to our environment, a huge threat to our economy. But it also presents an enormous opportunity. There's no country on the planet better placed to take advantage of a low carbon world than Australia. We've got masses of land. We've got some of the best wind and solar resources anywhere on the planet. We've got enough pumped hydro. We've got enough dams to be able to do pumped hydro to back up our sun and wind. So if we can get enough of that into the system, we can drive down our electricity prices and have some of the cheapest electricity prices in the world. And what you can do with that is have a competitive advantage, which will see the reindustrialisation of our country, see manufacturing return here, see new jobs being created here, because we can sell cheaper, cleaner products to the rest of the world. And it's really needed. We've got countries, some of our major trading partners, that have made up their minds on this. The EU, for example, is looking at putting trade tariffs for carbon-intensive goods and services. That means if we don't adjust how we produce our goods and services, we won't be able to sell them to markets. And for a small open market economy like Australia, we need to make sure that we can continue to export our goods and services to the rest of the world. Australians' prosperity has been underwritten by our export industries for generations. You know, in the 50s and 60s, we rode on the sheep's back. In more recent times, we exported our natural resources, our iron ore, precious minerals to the rest of the world. In the new economy, there is just as big an opportunity for us to export our products to the rest of the world because we have that competitive advantage. We need to grab it now. If we don't move quickly, though, we'll miss the opportunity and we'll be left behind. So it's too big an opportunity for us to miss out on. Yes, we've just come through some of the most devastating bushfires in our history. But last Tuesday, on World Wildlife Day, I got to stand beside one of Australia's most iconic animals, the koala, and announce that the government is funding 6 new koala habitat restoration projects around New South Wales. It's great news for koalas, and it's great news for other native animals. But it's also an example of the work that we're doing on the ground. From small projects to bigger plans, like growing our national parks, by 200,000 hectares, that will help build the resilience of our environment to climate change. Now, the purpose of Affinity is to create dialogue and understanding. So I hope today I've brought a message that I've brought into that dialogue a message of hope. Hope that is backed by evidence, that we are making a difference and will emerge from these challenges a cleaner, greener, and more prosperous society. That's what's possible, and that's what we need to work together to achieve. Thank you very much.